Hello. Today I'm going to talk about a strategy for accumulating knowledge in machine learning and data. My name is Sylvain Champonnois. I'm a researcher at CFM. CFM is a Paris-based hedge fund that's been around for more than 20 years. And I'm going to share a few tips that we've learned around the way conducting research in machine learning and alternative data to trade for our clients. So a starting point is that a lot of things have changed in financial markets over the previous years, right? In terms of market structure, now you have high frequency traders, you have dark pools, ETFs, you have the impact of retail investors. A lot of things have changed. If you think about the fuel that goes into hedge funds, you have a lot of data sets, a lot of new machine learning algorithms. And markets are still incredibly non-stationary because you have shocks like political shocks. So you have less to exploit and a lot more incentives to explore. So how do you do that? How do you explore? I think when you think about it, there's not a lot of instruction how to do it. There's not a map of the AI landscape. What you have to have is a strategy and a sort of compass that tell you what direction to take to explore the jungle. So I'm going to share a few things like, what are the right skills to acquire, how to do that, and also at a team level, how do you build the right research-driven culture to take advantage of these new environments. If you have any comments, any suggestions, any feedback, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love that. So another bit of motivation is natural language processing. So NLP has been very active in finance for a number of years, right? Because of sentiment extractions, word embeddings, and so on. But I think, BERT has been a significant break. So BERT is this paper that was published by a team at Google, and they also made their model available on the internet. So you could reuse their model and do things. So now, in order to take advantage of this, you needed to do a lot of things. You need to read the papers, understand what it means, and there was a range of papers afterwards that also try to understand what BERT was doing. So you need to read those papers. In order to understand what was happening, you needed also to run tests and to do that at scale with GPUs on the cloud. You needed to replicate some papers, get a hand on the data that was used, and try to see could you replicate the papers. In finance, biases matter a lot, so you need to understand whether there's some sort of biases in the results. And at the end, you run a backtest and you learn something that you didn't know before. Is it additive to what you already had, from previous generations of models or from other data sets? So it's a lot of work, and it happened for NLP, and it's happening in a range of domains. And the question is like, how do you organize yourself to take advantage of these disruptions? So I think the first thing to have in mind is, what is your strategy for learning? A strategy is just to start from the beginning, right? You learn math 101, and then you do probability 101, and then maybe statistics, and maybe a few months later, you do some programming. And, a number of years later, you go to do some machine learning, and maybe after all that, you're ready to do deep learning. So that's one strategy to build things bottom up. But obviously, like in such a, in an environment where things are changing so fast, you're going to be late. So I think another strategy is just to start by what we don't know, right? What are the open questions, and dig from there. So in that sense, I think it's really experimental, right? You really want to have something that works, a minimal viable product, and then go back in time and get to learn along the way what seems to be valuable to learn. Right? So in that spirit, I think there's this very nice course by the guys at FastAI, Jeremy Howard, and that's really the philosophy, right? Very quickly, you get a end-to-end model that trains, that classify images or that extract sentiment from text or that do a range of things. And then, once it works, maybe you've repurposed it for your domain for a specific task, then you can open the black box and try to see how things works in there. So I think like basic entry point like FastAI is really important. Then the second point is, I love machine learning, but if you want to have an impact, you need to do more than just a theory. You basically need to understand the operations, the engineering. And for a very long time, that was sort of uncovered. And fortunately, there's like these two great courses, one that's where you can find the material from at Stanford. And then there's this course called Full Stack Deep Learning. And those courses really emphasize the engineering aspect to it. And that's important if you want to have an impact. Then yet another point is, if you want to have an impact, you need to have data. You need to understand data. So data, it's important to do some scouting, maybe some engineering. At the end, you'll have to do, you'll have to train your model or do some back testing. But the core of it is know your data. Again, there's going to be some tools that are going to help you know your data, maybe annotate your data, do some labeling, build your own data sets. But that's really, really important. And I think it's important also going forward because, a data set that you know well can serve as a benchmark for some applications. Or a data that you know well, you can milk it, exploit it for a long time, as you build up some tools. So there's a lot of cumulative returns to data sets. Then a third point, I think, is that to have an impact, you need to read, and I think that's true. That's a general point, right? Reading is great, but I think in machine learning and that space, the AI space, it's just keeping up with new ideas, new research, and to me it means two things, right? So it means like deep reading carefully end to end some articles, and then it means also scanning a lot of papers. Just get a sense of like what's happening, reading abstract. So, and often you want to be as active as possible, like take notes. Maybe you have a pencil and you can, write down on the margin. Having a physical book or physical paper is useful, but also you have great annotation tools. I use a lot Hypothesis, but there's, Papership or Zotero that are quite nice. So, being able to store your notes and come back to them 6 months later, a year later, so that you really can accumulate knowledge is really important. Now, you're going to say, okay, what papers am I going to read? Where do I start? And I think it's hard and easy, right? The easy part is like you have archives, so you have a lot of papers, and now I think it's a great resources for a lot of papers. But the problem is that on archive, the number of papers is increasing exponentially. So how do you do that? So there's sort of two ways, right? There's a few applications that are dedicated to archive or to scientific papers, like Archive Sanity or Papers with Code or Connected Papers that are great to understand, connections between papers and explore. So obviously, if you start with a paper, you like it, you see in the bibliography some references to other paper, and you can explore that way. But connected papers or some application that will help you discover new connected papers. But obviously, there's another way. Science has become that sort of ecosystem where you have Twitter, you have a lot of people that can filter papers for you, point to interesting references, you have some courses, you have some podcasts, conferences, Kaggle, and so on. So here is a non-exhaustive set of references. So on Twitter, I put some tweets on the side, so maybe you can see some of the people that I find influencing, but I think you need to find, if you don't have a strategy there, you need to start with a few influencers and then expand, right? Then in terms of podcasts, there's a few things, there's a few that sort of listen, very, very regularly. I really like the Weight Biases, Gradient Descent, the third one. Chai Time Data Science is nice. This week in machine learning is really nice. So all this is really important to, hear some terms, to identify some new ideas that are there, and you can always dig up afterwards. On YouTube, you also have a lot of things, some conferences, some sort of long format presentation. There's this guy Yannick Kirchner that does reviews of papers. Then you have conferences. You have some really nice courses. The UCL DeepMind lecture series is great. You have some courses on Stanford and so on. Okay, so I think another important point is that at some point, one wants to move from being a consumer of science, or a consumer of papers, to a producer of papers, a producer of knowledge. And, that's very important. So, and how do you produce these insights? I think it's very often that you have like a model or some sort of theory, and then you have some data, you have something that's happening in the real world, and you go back and forth to see how aligned is your model with reality. So François Chollet described this as the loop of progress, right? You have an idea, you experiment with it, you see the results, that gives another idea, and so on, and you iterate as fast as possible. So now, in practice, what does it mean? Well, it means that you want to have the right tools, and you want to be able to document what you've done, right? To be able to, just have some sort of statement that you can make about the model and the data. So on the tool side, one of the problem is, sure, you want to iterate fast, but what are the right tools for visualization, for the deep learning framework, the infrastructure, and so on? And it's hard because not only is the number of data sets increasing exponentially, the number of papers also increasing exponentially, but I have a feeling that like the number of tools for machine learning is also expanding, also increasing exponentially. So I took this slide from the course, the full stack deep learning course that I mentioned before, and you see a lot of tools, right? You have the all-in-one, you have some sort of really specialized tools, and until you've tested it, it's very hard. I find it reasonably hard to understand what the tool is doing. So spending your time, some time also understanding the tools is really important, is really difficult, and you need to have some strategy. So again, with Twitter, you have some people who will say, "Oh, this tool is great," and then you can have an idea about what are the tools that people are using, but you need to spend time also on that front, understanding it. Okay, so a corollary of being a sort of knowledge producer is that you want to do primary research. And primary research means like, it might be internal, but it needs to be quality control, right? So you need to do some sort of experiment tracking. It needs to be reproducible. You need to have a sort of why question that you try to answer and so on. So I, to me, there's like a couple of things, right? So very often, negative results are as useful as positive results. So being able to document that is important. Now, often the published papers are only the positive results, but you want to be able to, at least internally, have a repository of knowledge where all these things get stored, and if you have a new idea, you can you can see what's been done before. Now, at CFM, we also produce a lot of external research. So on the right, I put a paper that we published on Archive recently on the work we've done with reinforcement learning for portfolio optimization. We do, every year we produce a lot of research externally. I think it's reasonably unusual for hedge funds to produce as much research as us. But I think, whatever the strategy, it's important to have some sort of quality control where, the statements are solid, and, you can go back to them later on and potentially build on those. Again, the cumulative returns are really important. Now, a last point is, if you want to have an impact, it's really hard to do it alone. You need a team. What does it mean? Here, I think it's like, in order to scale up, you need to hire the right people, build the right culture, maybe develop the right tools that everybody in the team will use, and that will create the sort of scale to improve those tools, the kind of like virtuous circles that made those tools better. So now, in my experience, I thought, and there's this quote by Adam Grant. I think that I've thought, always thought that like the people that want to learn are also generally the people that are really good at helping others and sharing insights and being those givers, right? And in environments where you need reasonably large teams to benefit from like those, to be above the critical size, I think it's really important to have those givers that become the glue in a team and help the team thrive. Now, I think for hedge funds in finance, it's generally a change, right? So if you look at investment banks, you'll find like that desk might be reasonably small, the teams are reasonably small, and hedge funds is really executive. And I think, changing a little bit the culture so that you have bigger teams with like complementary skills and, a spirit to give back to the communities is quite important. And obviously, sharing also helps to get feedback. So it becomes beneficial because you can learn faster as a team and you explore more. All right, so to conclude, I think, again, this kind of knowledge accumulation problem in machine learning today is quite hard. It's hard to keep up with the growth, again, of data sets, of algorithms, of tools. And it's difficult because it's multidimensional. There's a lot of things to keep track. I think at CFM we're reasonably lucky because we have a large team and we can do this kind of collective exploration. So it's easier. But again, there's Twitter that can help. There's like a lot of material that's available for free on YouTube, on the internet, and I think that's great. So if I can sort of summarize my current recipe, so it might change in a few months or years, but currently I think what I do is I spend some time on Twitter and on listening to podcasts and so on to have a high level overview of what's happening, hearing new terms, being open, being curious about what's happening. Once I identify some things that I don't know about and I want to learn about, I'll go on archive and read the papers, or I'll listen to some conferences or some long format presentations on YouTube. I think after that, it's really important to pip install packages and be at the bleeding edge to test things. It doesn't work, but you don't have the right environment. You need to reinstall things, but spending time replicating results of papers or using packages, that's really important, because very often you don't understand really what's happening until you've gotten your hands dirty. And then you want to engage with colleagues in the community. You want to get feedback, give feedback, and that's how you explore and how you're efficient in this environment. If you have comments, suggestions, don't hesitate to reach out. And I hope to see you in another conference. Bye-bye.